Welcome back to 20 Minutes of Clarity, where we go into financial topics that are really important for you to make better informed financial decisions. I'm your host, Jason Noble, and with me today is Andy Merchant. You know, I like to call him Andy the Man Merchant, ATMM, over here, just shelling out information, bringing out the cash. Okay, so we're getting into part duh of Medicare planning and healthcare planning in general, but really going into a deeper dive onto Medicare planning. So for those that are nearing retirement or in retirement, this is an important conversation because there's things that could occur throughout retirement that could really start changing your healthcare plan. So we're going to go into that today. And I think the cliffhanger that we had was around required minimum distributions really kicking into a higher premium. So Andy, I always like to give you the floor when we first get kicked off when I do the intro. So you have the floor.
Yeah, I don't know how this conversation with us turned out to where I'm like the money man and the decision. I mean, we do everything equal, but I think the best segue before we tie into that is this podcast also has a YouTube component, right? So I bring some knowledge, Jason. You bring knowledge every day, but you know what you bring better than anything is this drip, is this style. I see you supporting this wonderful, this new Clear Picture Financial hat, so those that want to see it, go check out our YouTube videos. We want you to go there, subscribe, check out some videos, and that way, at least you can see our faces, right? Because we've always said, Jason, you've got the best face for radio. So anyway, a little fun to kick off the morning discussion here, but excited to pick up. I know we had such an action-packed conversation, on our last week's podcast on just some of the strategies you can do to accumulate preparing for retirement and the healthcare expenses that come along with retirement. Now we're fast forward to we're thinking, or I should say, we also talked about things to address that clients can do that are preparing for retirement, but not quite to 65, right? It's how do you pay for healthcare between the ages of 60 and 65? So those that want to retire early. So we covered that. So if you guys missed last week, I want to pause this real quick. Go to clearpicturefinancial.com. Go get part one. Listen to part one first, because some of the things we're going to pick up on were the foundation was laid on that one, okay? But for those that tuned in last week and are ready to pick up on the cliffhanger we left you with, we talk RMDs, right? RMDs, required minimum distributions. I know we're going to have a big discussion on that as part of one of our series here, so we're not going to go into deep detail on this, but it's pretty simple. The government says that over the time you've been able to save money in a deferred account, your IRA usually, right, or a 401k, and then at some point in the future, right now we're at age 73, that could change, this keeps continuing conversation, you have to start taking out whatever the government's percentage of that money is, right? So let's just take into account, why is that important, Jason? Why are we going to talk about that today when it comes to RMDs? Especially from the fact that, take a scenario, you got a client, you got $2 million in a deferred account. You turn 73, 74, right? We could probably do the math real quick, but we know that required minimum distribution goes as ordinary income on your tax return. You referenced it last week on our podcast. Line 11 is where you go look at, but this is a contributing factor. So why is that? I mean, Jason, why do we pay so much attention to projecting RMDs in the future? We might be talking to a client right now that's 65 and like, I'm not even close to 73. What are you talking about? But we're planning between now and 73. What is it? Why is it so important that we cover this?
Well, it's going to be the 2-year look back that is involved within Medicare premiums. And so every single year they come out, when I say they, the government comes out with saying, okay, the premiums for Medicare this year are going to be $175 for Part B. But if you have over a certain amount of income 2 years ago, then you're not going to pay the $175. You're going to pay a lot more. You're going to pay a higher amount. Okay. It's the closest thing that we have in the tax code law that's like a means-based test kind of thing of like, what is your income means coming in? Now, a really interesting example of this is, okay, so you take your required minimum distribution when you turn 73, and it's a large amount that comes out because if you have a lot of money in pre-tax accounts like traditional IRAs or rollovers, or even a 401k if you still want to do that at that age. I don't know why, but anyway, when you're turned 75, you're going to get this notification that you're not paying the normal Medicare Part B anymore. You got to pay $450 a month per person. And you're going, what is this? Like, you're flipping mad, right? And you're like, you're going to start calling people, like, maybe your financial advisor. If you're going at this on your own, who are you calling? Your healthcare provider? Like, they're going to be able to walk you through the 2-year look back. Anyway, so like, you're kind of stuck, but you got to pay it. You got to pay it, right? Okay. Now, the other thing that comes into play with required minimum distributions is in the first year, you got to do the RMDs. You can actually delay that for the next year and take it out before April 1st. But in the following year, you got to do 2 RMD distributions, further driving up your MAGI for the PTC, not for the PTC, but for the IRMA, for the 2-year look back. That could really take you from, like, let's say instead of 175 to 450, that could pop you up to the 500 plus mark. And just paying monthly premiums in Part B. I'm not even touching on Part D premiums, the drug policy, that also will go up, which is interesting. Okay. So what we're getting at is what could you be considering and doing to offset your required minimum distributions later on in life so that you're not getting raked over the coals on Medicare planning? Now, when we're talking about Part B, Part D, supplemental policies, we are talking about original Medicare. There is Part C, which is known as Medicare Advantage. That just plays by different rules. There's pros and cons to those decisions. Maybe, Andy, in a future podcast, we could bring in a healthcare expert that could talk about Medicare Advantage versus Part D. The reason why I don't want to talk about that today is I don't want to be a jack of all trades and a master of none. When it comes to selecting Medicare Advantage versus original Medicare, yes, I have a conversation with my clients over the pros and cons of both of those. But then I go, here's a healthcare expert that does this 24/7, 365, that's going to help you make a decision based off of your healthcare needs. Yeah. And then I can work with you as the planner based off of that guidance to then put you in a position that we need to be to figure out what we got to do with the other parts of your finance. It's all connected.
Yeah, right. I mean, lane management, professional lane management is so important, right? And you and I talk all the time. One of the biggest things that we strive to do when we work with our clients in the Clear Picture Wealth program is that we're proactive in working and reaching out to their professional partners, right? We don't want you to, like, give you the information. Like, for those listening, we could tell you, hey, RMD planning should be important. Income planning is going to be important. Check out line item or line 11 on your tax return, factor out your AGI, and then determine whether or not your healthcare premium is the best with your insurance. Let's take that confusion out. Let's simplify this for everybody that's listening and partnering with us. And we'll take that question, we'll take that information, and we'll have those conversations with your professional partner, right? That's the difference between the Clear Picture Wealth program and traditional asset management client relationships, right? And I think that's important. And it is lane management. So I love what you said there, because in the last week's podcast, we talked the importance of talking to a CPA on getting the tax savings component. Now you're talking about what's the right health planning component, right? When it comes to the Medicare planning, that's not in our direct lane, but it's definitely something that we're going to play a heavy influence on as far as income distribution planning and so on. So I think that's important as well. So sorry, I had to interject on that little note because I love lane management. I think it's so important.
Yeah. And so this is another example of just like how a personal decision, a financial planning decision could also impact your Medicare premiums, especially with the 2-year look back, was around home sales. You know, if your sale of your home exceeds the exclusion amount, $250,000 for individual, $500,000 for joint filers, then that income is that proceeds is considered towards taxable income. So Andy, I mean, we have had in our country just a lot of price appreciation on real estate really since 2009, right? It's been a while. We're long on the tooth on this. We're seeing some capitulation in some areas right now with the real estate prices, but overall values have gone up quite a bit, considerably. And overall, now, if you're listening to this in one area that the real estate is doing poorly, I'm sorry, right? I didn't cover all the different zip codes and counties throughout the entire United States. And if you're listening to this in Europe, I'm sorry, this is not really applicable to you. But anyway, let's just go forward. We had these appreciations, and so we have clients. You and I both have clients that they're moving. I mentioned this in the last podcast. They're moving closer to their grandkids. They want to be near their grandkids, right? And they have these proceeds. Well, did the advisor, did your trusted professional say, hey, by the way, this is something that you want to do, and I know we're going to do it, but we have to know the impact of this decision. We have to know what this is going to mean from a financial planning and healthcare planning situation. So Andy, I know I kind of took the ball and ran with the home sale. Is there anything that you're having conversations with your clients on home sales or anything when it comes to Medicare planning?
Well, it's not just, home sales is one of them, right? Because that's something that people do, but let's talk about every day, right? If you've got an account, capital gains, right? Counts have grown. You decide that you want to take some risk off the table. Your advisor is trying to build a portfolio that's modeling to your risk profile. And in an effort to do that, you have to sell something, generate capital gains, goes into your modified adjusted gross income. And now that also affects it, right? So if you take into a consideration, maybe now you start a Social Security. Let's say 65, you get Medicare. You start it, right? But you've got enough income planning that you delay your Social Security start date until you're 67, right? But now you hit 67, you start Social Security. You might have a nice strong market run, and so you do some active planning, take some gains off the table. Now you got capital gains. A big one right now, let's just bring it into the equation. A lot of people that we probably talked to took advantage of the more favorable treasury yields, right? Treasury bills that paid income are now considered income on your tax return. It's ordinary income. So not only are you paying higher in your income bracket, now you're adding. So you start adding all of these little factors in there that you can control. You may not be able to control your home sale price, right? There's exemption limits. There's things around that people can generally work around. But man, it's just, do you really want to wake up 2 years from now thinking that a decision you made 2 years? Sometimes we forget what we did like last week, let alone what happened 2 years ago. So there's a lot of other factors. My last one is for, our accredited investors that are active in private investments or our business owners that are transitioning. You could have an exit that could generate or drive up your income that will push it out, right? And then so you could sell your business, or you could sell your private equity, an investment, or have it exit. And now you've got grounds for a higher income. So I just think that it's income planning is so important. Income forecasting is so important for many people because of those reasons.
Yeah. And, sometimes it's like one of those things that could also drive this is an inherited IRA.
Yeah.
Your parents passed away. You're dealing with the loss of a loved one. If they have RMDs, you got to make sure they satisfy those before the estate is settled. But anyway, so now you get it. Now you got 10 years to withdraw the money. Well, if it's 10 years to withdraw the money, you're going to want to do that systematically majority of the time. Don't take anything that Andy and I say right now and be like, well, they told me I got to do it this way. Well, you got to understand, we're not talking to you 100% of the time. We're talking to the masses, okay? But typically speaking, you're going to want to systematically withdraw that over 10 years to spread out the tax liability. But if it's a sizable account, and you're on Medicare, and it pops your MAGI to a higher threshold, well, now you're going to get hit with this, okay? This is where a wealth transfer conversation with loved ones that Andy and I talked about in about 2 or 3 podcasts before today, those conversations, we start to factor that in because we truly want to make sure money stays in the family and not go to Uncle Sam or not go to paying Medicare premiums, right? We rather keep that in the family and you use that money to create long-term legacy planning. But inherited IRA, you inherit a sizable IRA from your parent.
Yeah.
And now here you go. You're like, okay, well, to do this systematically, we've got to withdraw like $200,000 a year. those that are watching and listening, you're like, what a wonderful problem to have. It is, but it's not. It's still a problem.
Yeah, well, it's great to have. It's great to have the wealth, but if you're going to have this wealth just to give 30 or 40% of it back to the government or pay higher premiums to insurance carriers, like, is that what you took all this risk? Is that really what you want to do? This is all about this whole series is about protecting wealth and optimizing your wealth. And so if you're aware of it and there's a strategy to reduce it, why wouldn't you be interested in hearing like, oh, great, I didn't know I could do that, right? I didn't know that maybe if a life event happened, some of the things you listed, Jason, that I could actually maybe file for an appeal, right? That is a process. I don't think a lot of people talk about it, right? But there's certain like grounds on why you could file an appeal if you had one of those life events happen. Not to mention, what if you are later in life and life happens, you lose a spouse and you're ready to get back on the dating scene, but then you're later. So you're going to a dating app. You end up getting married. It's happiness again. That changes your financial situation, right? That could affect your Medicare premiums. And now, like we talked, going from $164 or whatever it is a month for an individual, right, up to $500. I mean, what could you do with the extra $400 or $500 every single month? What other grounds of wealth could you build, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I just think that it's having that additional conversation. This podcast today and all of our podcasts are not about take this action, go and do it, right? They're actionable conversations to have, all centered around how the Clear Picture Wealth Program and what we do every single day for our clients and those that want to have a more clear financial path. Go to those sites, get the foundation. Don't just take this holistic, oh, here's a 140-page report around your financial plan. Thank you for the $6,000. Now, I don't know really how you're going to implement it tomorrow approach, right? Let's make it living, breathing, start with the basics, back it down. These will come up in your planning conversation. I promise you they will. And sometimes, Jason, it's like, it's okay to pay a higher Medicare premium, to your point that led me into my ramble discussion here. It's, you might have taken something and had a windfall that just happens to be a higher premium. The goal then is, how do we get you back down to the normal?
Do you rip the Band-Aid and maybe pay it higher 1 year and not spread out over the full time? It's going to be on a case by case. Each scenario is going to be extremely different. You and I, let's say we have 20 meetings a week. I can't tell you any one of those 20 is like any other one that we had. Every single meeting that I have a day is extremely different conversation. If someone sat next to us in meetings, they'd be like, do you just contradict yourself all day? Well, no. What's appropriate for this person is extremely inappropriate for this couple, and vice versa, right? And so, but it's like, how do you navigate all these different things? And I do want to take, as we wrap up this part of the podcast, is I love that you brought up that you could file for what they call life-changing events. It's form SSA-44, Sierra Alpha 44. That's the document that you could fill out for life-changing events such as work stoppage, divorce, death of a spouse, disease, or even fraud. Okay. It's a process. You're dealing with the federal government. Pack your patience. Okay. Also, you got to call them. They won't ever call you. It will all be through the mail system. This is very important. Okay. But what I'm getting at is we did have a couple. They stopped working. We filed the SSA-44. What I did, when I say we, let me take a step back. I said, hey, there's this document that you could fill out that can help you with it. We'll file an amendment. Let's talk to your accountant. Because when it comes to anything with like forms from the federal government, I just want to get the accountant involved, right? It was basic information that was filled out. We sent it in. Now, in the meantime, as the government was deciding on if this was a viable solution or not, they still had to pay the higher amount. They were still paying around $450 a month. Then they came back, a paper came back saying that it did qualify and that their Medicare premiums will be reverted back down to the $175. But wait, there's more. They got paid back. It got retroactive in. And I believe how it worked was they didn't have to pay for a few months to then get it cleaned up. So that was done, and they were extremely happy with just me providing that access of information, saying, hey, here's something that we could do. Now, when it comes to like someone who works stoppage due to selling a business, it's a little bit more nuanced. And I always will say the answer is always going to be no if you never ask the question.
Yep. Yeah.
So ask the question, see what could happen, see if something could happen that could alleviate some of that pain point. Andy, as we wrap up,
hey, that's the goal of these conversations, is to create that awareness, right? I mean, as we're wrapping up here, as you just said there, Jason, you and I, we work with clients from all different backgrounds. We're fortunate to be part of one of the largest independent registered investment advisors at Prime Capital, where we have hundreds of other advisors that are going through experiences with their clients. And what we can do is we bring all that together and share that with our client that may never have ever thought about that unique experience. It may never apply to them again, but we bring all that into one house, understand the client situation, and then we can turn around and help apply that, right? But we have to bring that attention. You have to be aware of it. As we wrap, and as I say, you have to care about your plan more than I do, and I care a lot, right? And so this is such an important topic. So much proactive planning. I hope everybody likes part 2.
Like part 2. Well, like it, subscribe, follow us, go to Clear Picture Financial to learn more, download the white paper, mark it up, make it your own, take notes, highlight things that really grab you and are attention to you, and then execute, implement on those things. That was Andy the Man Merchant, ATMM. I am Jason Noble. You just watched 20 Minutes of Clarity. Thank you so much for tuning in and watching. We appreciate you.